Good morning to all of you and good evening to us. And it's my pleasure and my honor to start this webinar presentation and to start and speak and give you an explanation about the history of this, the Israeli Inherited Retinal Disease Consortium. We started our activity at March 2014 and ended it really in type of financial at September 2020. But we are still going on, and as I'll explain later. Our goal was to, our major goal was to do the mapping of all or the major part of the Israeli inherited retinal degenerative disease in order to be able to support these patients, to improve the situation, to get smaller number of IRDs in Israel, and to research for some therapeutic. So we started. We wanted to do this mapping in order to get prevention and counseling, basically by the genetic counselors, in order to prevent the growth of the number and to do counseling for those who are affected. We wanted to have this, once mapping the entire or most of the patient in Israel, our patient can volunteer and can participate in clinical trials when there are clinical trials, because there are not that many patients in the world having the same gene mutation. And that was one of the goals. And the other goal is that our patient will be able to get as fast as possible the approved treatment. So when something like Luxturna come out, we can look at our database and see which patient is ready for such treatment. And then we wanted to have research intended to develop treatments for genes that are unique to Israel. And you'll hear about it today. We have more specific goals, aims. We wanted to determine the prevalence of inheritance patterns in Israel and about our ethnic groups. We wanted to discover new genes and new mutation in known genes. We wanted to know the prevalence of genes for each Israeli ethnic group. And we wanted to learn the phenotype-genotype correlation of the Israeli IRD. There is a big advantage to start such a program in Israel. The population of Israel is about 10 million people, and they are located in a relatively small geographic area. We have many segregated ethnic groups. Jews, we have Ashkenazis, North African, Yemenite, and we also find that Jews from Georgia, they tend to marry within the group, or from Bukhara, they tend to marry between the groups. So there are many ethnic groups to be studied. The Arabs, we consider as Muslim and Christians. We have Druze, Bedouins, and many more. So it's a very rich ethnic genetic background. There are specific founder genes for each ethnic group, so it's good to learn them. And beside all this, on top of all this, the ophthalmologists in Israel is highly advanced, and we have some excellent genetic centers that are spread all over Israel to reach the Israeli population. And here is a map of the groups of the consortium. We have right now, we have 5 clinical electrophysiology of vision groups. Eyal Banin is in Jerusalem, and Hadas Neumann and Diana Tzur and Yigal Rottenstreich and Miri Ehrenberg are 3 groups in the center of Israel, in Tel Aviv area, and Rina Leibo is in Haifa. So they are spread from north to south, to almost south. We have several genetic centers, Dror Sharon in Jerusalem, Hagid Bris-Feldman in Tel Aviv, Eran Pras in Tel Aviv. We have Tamar Ben Yosef from Haifa, and Ohad Birk and Libe Gretchen in Beersheba. And then we have one bioinformatics group, Noam Shomron, who is located in Tel Aviv. So we are all spread very well in Israel. But one of the biggest problems was to find the modes of recruiting patients. Once we started to work, we had many patients with known diagnosis. We wanted to reach them and to bring them for genetic diagnosis. So the ERG-VP centers, the electrophysiology centers, we had many patients in the Eyal Banin lab, in my lab, in Yigal Rotenstein. We can go in our database and find them and try to convince them to come because it will be for the benefit. And each one who came in was sent to the genetic center for analysis. And then the ophthalmologists from HMOs, those are working in the field, when they find a new suspect for IRD, they send them to the ERG center, who will send them to the genetic center. Then sometimes the ophthalmology in the field, in the HMO, will send directly a patient to the genetic center. Now, depending on the genetic center, the type of patient, they may send them for phenotype analysis, and then we send them back to the genetic center. Lucky for us, we had the Lirot, the group from the Israel that is the counterpart to FFB in Israel, who is supporting research in vision. They organize special meetings of interest for interest groups, meeting for RP patients, for Usher patients, and others. And they were organized all over Israel, from Haifa to Beersheba. And you see one of the groups here sitting and listening. And then there was some self-referral. Patients read about us in the Israeli press, and they call and say, yes, I am IRD, I want to have a genetic analysis. And they came to the genetic center, who sent them to us, to the ERG-VP center, or did not. It depends on the phenotype determination. I want to give you, Israel is, as I said, it's a small country, many people, and a lot of ethnic group, and we wanted to have a rough estimate, and this is a very, very rough estimate. Dror Sharon is working now on a much more precise prevalence data, but I'll give you just a rough one. So until today, we recruited about 4,500 families with IRD, and they all underwent or gave blood for genetic analysis. And then I made one assumption, that each isolate family include only one IRD, and all the others include at least two. Sometimes I'm wrong, but sometimes there are many more than two. So I think I'm not that far from the truth. And what I got is that if I average, we have 26% isolate and 74% all the rest, which meaning autosomal recessive, autosomal dominant, and sex-linked. And so the analysis came out that the average number of patients in each family is about 1.74. And if I take 1.74 multiplied by 4,500, which is 7830 IRD patients, and this is all IRD, not just RP. And if I look at the Israeli population, which is 9,700,000, I come up with a number which is 1 out of every 1,240 people. This is a very high prevalence. And I think I'm not wrong by much. It can be 1,000 or 1 to 1,500, but that's about the range of precision. And this is a very high number. This is, and you'll see later where does it come from. I want to give you a little bit explanation, how did we work and how did we learn just from looking at the patients. So at the beginning, when we start, look at the blue This is when we collected most of the data, we had quite a few autosomal recessive and a lot of isolate. Few dominant and few sex-linked. Once we start gathering data and evaluating the genetics, we realized that most of the isolate were really autosomal recessive. And as you see today, we have a lot of autosomal recessive, which is the red, very few isolate, the same autosomal dominant, and a little bit more sex-linked. So we can just by having mapping, the first mapping, we can get differences in the type of in the how do you say the inheritance pattern. And another thing, what we did, we took the number of patients from each ethnic group and compared them to the number of patients and to the number of population in Israel. So there's or to the number of IRD. And you see that for Druze, they are about 1.6% from the Israeli population, and they have about 2% of the IRD group, which makes sense. Christian Arab is also similar, 1.9% from the population, 3% a little bit higher in the IRD. Christian Muslim is very high. We have 18% in the population and 31% of IRD, and Jews is 73% of the population and 64% of the IRD. The Muslim Arab is really an interesting group. It turns out that they have a very high rate of consanguineous marriage, and they have a lot of autosomal recessive, and the IRD is much more prevalent in the Muslim group. I just want to finish with this slide, and it's a summary for all what you hear later. We was funded by FFB and the Israeli Ministry of Health for a total of about $1.3 million from March 2014 to September 2020. However, we didn't stop working. We are working still, and all the consortium is still alive. The groups, the centers are working together on the specific aims that I listed before. As a matter of fact, 2 weeks ago on Thursday, the May 11, we gathered for our annual scientific day, demonstrating the innovative research that is carried out in the Consortium Center. We would like to thank the FFB for their generous financial support. I'm not taking it for the end. I want to say it at the beginning, and specifically to Dr. Amy Laster for the understanding of our needs, being flexible with our request. And I would like to thank Lirot organization for helping us. They help us a lot to secure the financial support from the Israeli government and for organizing 6 meetings of IRD.